Wizards of the Coast has announced essentially Vintage-Lite coming to the game of Magic the Gathering, specifically the timeless format announced for Magic the Gathering, announced with the December 4th banned and restricted announcement. And there's a lot of questions that people have. I even released a short form video on it, link to that down below. But a lot of people have hesitations for it just because it's on Arena, and that's completely fair because so do I. But I wanted to use this video to walk you through this because I think there's some people on the fence. This might actually get you to download the Arena client. So for those of you who may be more invested players playing like Modern or Eternal formats, let's take a walk through what the Timeless format is and why it actually might be really interesting for you. Now, let's go over, firstly, the December 4th ban and restricted announcement. Unlike the last BNR, where they just said no changes and announced play boosters, this actually kind of went under the radar where they announced, again, the Timeless format. So let's go over the basics, where the Timeless format is coming actually as early as December 12th, right around the corner as of the posting of this video. So what is it? It is a non-rotating constructed format played with 60 card decks where every card on MTG Arena is legal, so similar to Historic in that sense. This includes digital only cards, which I think is the hesitation for a lot of people, the upcoming Khans of Tarkir set release, and any future set releases. Timeless will use the rebalanced version of digital only cards, but keep the original printings of all non-digital cards. So we've had rebalancing of like Orcish Bowmasters and the One Ring on Arena for Historic, but they won't be doing that for Timeless. So if it's paper, it'll be 1-to-1, but it will also be playing with the digital only cards. We hope that Timeless will be filled with fast, fun, and exciting games as players will have access to the most powerful cards on the Arena client. So there's a lot to unpack there. And we're even going to talk about some of the differences between Timeless and what Historic has to offer. But first and foremost, we have many things such as, well, a restricted list. There are cards already being banned and restricted from the Timeless format. Specifically, though, I should mention, they're not being banned, but again, restricted, which is different, a different concept for many of you players that maybe play Modern primarily or play Standard or some of the Arena stuff. Restrictions are where you only have access to one copy of the card in your deck, where you can still play it. But again, this has been a mechanic that's only existed in Vintage before. Vintage, the oldest format in Magic the Gathering, allowing you to play with all cards, banning a few things that mess with the card's rules and the fundamentals, but go with a restricted list primarily. Now, Channel being one of them. The restricted in Vintage, all right? So we already have Channel being banned because for those of you that don't know, being able to channel into being banned in Historic, into crazy things like Channel Fireball, then notably the whole naming convention behind your favorite Magic the Gathering website, and then also being able to channel into bigger things like Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger or Emrakul the Promised End. You can see how cards like this are already being restricted. You can't ban them, but you have access to doing this. You could turn 2, there probably is a way to turn 1 out a Emrakul the Promised End, take over your opponent's turn and really mess up their hands, tap out their mana, discard some cards, depending on the strategy, make them use up their resources inefficiently, even though they get an extra turn after that. And heck, even the Ulamog from before that, if it's later in the game, exiling some early lands from them, knocking them out of resources that way is really powerful. So again, you are still able to do powerful things, just in a limited sense. So powerful things are coming in this format. Next up, Timeless is a competitive format, so we're launching it with best of 1 and traditional best of 3 rank queues and unranked play queue. Ranked play will contribute to a player's constructed rank in the same way that the other MTG Arena formats play to it. So that's going to be big as well. You're going to be able to enter potentially paid events and go up in your Arena rank and play to the top echelons of play on the client with this format. So if it becomes really powerful and really fun in terms of the cards and the sets being played into it, which we're going to talk about in a second, this could be a really big way for competitive players to get that edge of feeling like you're doing powerful things and not just standard, legal, crazy, historic stuff, but really good constructed play patterns that just have powerful spells, just like what Vintage is. Vintage is a very fast format, but one with very intricate interactions. And that's what really this format could be for the Arena client, where games are generally longer in Standard. You could play something like Timeless, where games are rather quick, but highly interactive, where we could be introducing some very powerful cards with the potential of a Timeless specific set, introducing cards like Forcible maybe. That's something to look for down the line, especially with a restricted list, not a ban list. Now, again, mentioning the fact that the restricted list is one specifically used in Vintage, I think this is a good direction to go for the format. Allowing players to experience power, but in a limited sense, is very important for attracting players and providing a differentiating factor between the other formats that they might interact with all throughout their Magic career. Vintage is a very inaccessible format because of price, but because this is on Arena, there is still going to be a relatively high price tag, because we're going to touch on that later with Wildcards. But it's not going to be tens of thousands of dollars like purchasing a Black Lotus, or you actually have the pizzazz of the Arena client versus the dull Microsoft 2000s look that MTGO has. So that's also very unattractive for people as well. But some of the things that exist on this restricted list are like Ancestral Recall, Black Lotus, Channel, as the aforementioned, the Moxes, Necropotence, Ponder, Time Twister, Tinker, all these really powerful cards that provide so much mana, value, interaction, whatever it might be. Heck, Karn the Great Creator was actually extremely busted in a format full of Moxes. You can imagine getting that out really quick, stopping the Mox. You can tell how Karn the Great Creator is really powerful in this format. So again, a lot of valuable options that this format has are restricted. And so I think this is a really cool analog and a really cool way to bring back or just shift away interest from those formats, but maybe introduce Vintage on Magic Arena, which I think is, again, the move forward. Now, this isn't exactly in the same way that the Magic Anniversary Edition was done, where they printed proxies in paper, because you have to remember that, especially on Magic Online, you can actually print the Power 9 into it, because this is how you get around the reserve list. It's not actually physical copies. People aren't collecting the online versions. So Black Lotus is available for as cheap as $20 on Magic Online. Now on Arena, there isn't a 1-for-1 buying system, so they're going to be able to, in the future, potentially just print a Timeless Master set with Black Lotus, with the Mox, with Force of Will, with other powerful Magic cards that are immediately going to get restricted, but then you have access to play insanely powerful vintage style, vintage level games on the Arena client. And I think this type of power and interaction is exactly what people are looking for in a fast-paced environment to test and play continuously. And I think this will scratch an itch that a lot of players have when it comes to not being able to do powerful things in the clients they have, or maybe just not having the money to maybe rent their, favorite Magic cards from their favorite online decks, and just going the free-to-play model on Arena to play powerful formats like this is, I think, the accessibility direction that is really key to ensuring the success of Magic Arena and just bringing more players in. Now, what are some of the differences between Timeless and Historic? We all know that Historic is kind of the all-encompassing, the legacy now of Magic Arena, where you have access to all cards from the Arena client, but there is a banned list on there. There is a suspended list as well, but there is a banned list on Historic. So there are cards that you outright cannot play with. But in Timeless, they are just going with, again, a restricted list. So that's going to be the big thing. But what about Historic? The Historic format as the place to play with all your cards on Arena, but over time has shifted to a more curated format. They're happy with Historic, and because it's balanced and a diverse metagame, it offers a unique play experience. They want to keep the power level the same and have it continue to grow in that way. So they believe it's at an enjoyable place right now, and they're going to be pre-banning the cons fetches on Historic, but you can play them in Timeless. Fetch lands are coming to an Arena format, and I think this is what's attractive for a lot of people. Fetch lands are arguably the most powerful lands, powerful cards outside of Power 9 in the duels. They are arguably, and for some of you, that might be very hard to grasp. Some of you are Pioneer players, newer Modern players. You might not play the older formats. Some of you might be Arena viewers watching this, but just know fetch lands are the most format warping, game defining cards cycle in general in Magic the Gathering, outside of, like, again, the Power 9 and the original duels. This type of power, this type of mana fixing will allow for efficiency, great interaction, great diverse play that you only find in the older formats. And over time, as the card list for this format gets curated and added to, we will see more powerful interactions, more powerful decks, really, really cool play in a 1v1 environment that you cannot experience anywhere outside of the Magic Arena format. So I think that's what's really powerful for this format. Just allowing fetch lands into this is going to be the big defining factor outside of the restricted and historic, the restricted list and the historic format. Now, fetch lands, I believe the cons fetches are only we're only going to get access to 5. There is another set that will bring in the Zendikar fetches, so I believe we're only going to get access to a limited amount. I will confirm that later, but that is still good enough. We're going to get a full access to a good spread of them, and honestly, just being able to search up one or the other. The shock lands are already available on the Arena client, so the mana base is all there. You are going to have pretty much near perfect mana bases, like literally 90% perfect mana bases available to you from the start, which is going to be great for any of your deck building needs. You can go to your legacy decks, your vintage decks. When the powerful cards are put into this format, which I guarantee you will be put there, you can go to those formats for analogous decks and then just build from there. For now, you're probably looking for like modern powerful stuff or things that are in Pioneer and just boosting them up, and that's going to be really exciting. Now, the Pyre 9 already exists on Arena as well. We see that through Oracle of the Alpha, where you can conjure up the Power 9, and this is a list of the Power 9 for those of you unaware. You have kind of taking extra turns, easy mana, all the good stuff. But this is where people's biggest hesitation are. They don't like the digital only mechanics because it feels like a big step away from what Magic should be in many people's minds. The definition of the play experience, the play fantasy that you get from Magic is broken with mechanics like Conjure. It says conjure the Power 9 into your library. You bring in cards that don't exist outside of the game and you generate them into your deck. Mechanics that you cannot do in paper. That is what Magic Arena provides. Now, it's going to be hard for me to convince you out of this. If this is a big turnoff for you, I understand completely. This is my biggest hesitation with playing Historic as well. But with the attraction, again, of introducing powerful mechanics and the fetch lands, I think it's worth it to understand that cards like this can actually be broken wide open, new types of interactions, new combo decks, new powerful things. Could be the direction forward and the reason to play it. What I would say is to try it at the very least if you have access to the resources. Now, the resources is the last thing I want to touch on. Outside of your hesitations with the Power 9, the Conjure mechanic, and any other digital only thing that's happening on the Arena client, Wildcards are the last thing to touch on. Now, fetch lands, shock lands, your mana base at minimum is going to be really expensive. They are going to require a whole swath of gold and mythic wildcards. Outside of that, if you want to be like, if they print in a timeless Masters set and are putting in Black Lotus, putting in the Mox, those are not going to be uncommon and uncommon. Those are going to be at gold and mythic wildcard rarities. And so I think this format is going to be really expensive initially to get into, especially for those newer players that don't have the Arena client. That is going to be a big push away, because then you're going to have these digital cards that you don't own, right? And that you have to invest into to play, that Wizards can manipulate at any time, which I think is, again, a fair hesitation. At least on Magic Online, the cards are 1-for-1. You can play with the rental service, so you don't have to pay that initial kind of forefront cost to play some of the top decks. You can just pay a rental service monthly, but you can't do that here. You have to pay for wildcards. And honestly, like I just said, this format is going to be expensive. There's going to be, like, decks are just going to be 60 to 75 gold mythic wildcards. That's just the truth. You might have a basic island in there, you might have a common, uncommon, but that is the truth of this format. And I think that is the big glaring problem for this, and one that Wizards has to address. I don't know how they're going to do it, shifting rarities, providing availability or accessibility to Power 9 or whatever it might be, but that is the big thing to address. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the timeless format. Is this going to be the format that breaks open Magic Arena for many players? Are you going to be trying timeless on your end? I'm gonna install Arena and try it out. I don't know if I'll be introducing it as gameplay to the channel, but we'll see how the format evolves from December 12th onwards. If they introduce a Timeless Masters where they're hard introducing like Power 9 and everything, I think that will definitely get me to try things out. I would love to be playing Vintage-Lite on the Arena format, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Are you playing Vintage on Magic Online? What is the most powerful format you're playing? I'd love to hear it all. Thank you for watching.